You know, sometimes you just come across an idea that clicks and suddenly you're looking at history, well, a bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're diving into one of those. Imagine this. A really sophisticated ancient seafaring culture, maybe even tied to legends like Laputa, playing a key role in, like, global civilization.
It sounds pretty out there, I know, but that's the kind of aha moment we're exploring today.
Yeah, exactly.
And for this, we're looking at some fascinating, maybe controversial, theories about an ancient maritime group called the Laputa People. Our main source here is a detailed transcript from a Toland vlog video.
Okay, so the name Laputa, a lot of you are probably thinking Miyazaki, the floating castle, right?
Right, Studio Ghibli.
And yeah, feels like we might be drifting into pure fantasy. But hang on. Because the ideas here, while definitely provocative, are actually based on interpretations of research discussed in that video.
Yeah, our mission really is to unpack the evidence, the theories suggesting these ancient seafarers existed and it maybe had this huge impact.
And the video transcript lays out two main ways people use this term Laputa people. It's important we get this straight from the start.
Definitely. First, there's the Laputa culture. Scientifically recognized seafaring people, Pacific, about 3,600 years ago. Solid archaeology there.
Okay, Laputa. Got it.
Then there's this other idea, more ancient, more speculative perhaps, the Laputa people proposed by a Japanese petroglyph researcher, Kazutaka Takuchi.
And his work builds on earlier stuff.
Exactly, builds on ideas from a Harvard professor, Barry Fell. So yeah, two groups, Laputa and Laputa. Similar names, potentially very different things we need to keep track.
Right. Let's start with the foundation. This video talks about Barry Fell's idea of an ancient one-world civilization. What's that about?
Okay, so Fell, he started out as a biology professor at Harvard, interestingly, but then he got really deep into epigraphy, studying old inscriptions and petroglyphs, rock carvings. And he proposed this idea that ancient cultures, like all over the world, might actually share a common origin, a single super early civilization spreading its influence.
Wow. Okay, a shared origin. And how did this culture spread, according to this theory?
Well, the thinking highlighted in the video is mainly by sea. That seafaring peoples were the ones carrying this culture, especially things like megalithic culture, building with massive stones.
Right, like Stonehenge or Buckley, those kinds of things. But maybe much earlier connections.
Potentially. The video mentions that within epigraphy circles, particularly the American Society for Epigraphy, this ancient one-world idea has some traction, this belief in a very early unified civilization.
Yeah, and then Takuchi comes in, the Japanese researcher.
Yes. He apparently took this foundation and ran with it, proposed an even older maritime culture, crisscrossing the globe. And
he specifically called them the Laputa people. Why that name?
Well, the video suggests Takuchi connected his research, especially on petroglyphs, to this idea of a foundational seafaring civilization, building on Fell's work, and he landed on this Laputa people concept as the key drivers of this ancient global network.
Okay, so let's make sure we separate these clearly. The known group first, the Laputa culture. The video really emphasizes this distinction.
Absolutely critical. The Laputa were definitely real, archaeologically documented, lived around 3,600 years ago, based in the Laputa region of Melanesia, that's out in the Pacific, near Australia.
And they were pretty significant sailors.
Hugely significant. They were the first known people to make these incredibly long deep-sea voyages, settling remote Pacific islands like Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga. Real pioneers.
And the name Laputa comes from their pottery.
That's right, from Laputa ware, this distinctive type of pottery found back in 1952 in New Caledonia at a site called Laputa, Site 13 specifically.
And the video mentioned something interesting about that pottery, a resemblance to Japanese pottery.
Yeah, Jamansabata pottery, the video points out this resemblance, which is, well, intriguing. It raises questions about possible very early links or shared influences between the Pacific and Japan. Could just be coincidence, of course, but...
Something to think about. So the Laputa culture time frame is roughly 3,600 to about 2,800 years ago.
That's the estimate based on the pottery finds. But here's another puzzle. Around 2,800 years ago, the production of this specific Laputa pottery seems to just stop abruptly.
Really? Why?
I don't entirely know. It adds to the mystery around them. They're often called an enigmatic maritime people for a reason. Research is definitely ongoing.
Okay, so that's the Laputa. Established, fascinating, but with some mysteries. Now, let's circle back to Takuchi's more, let's say, radical idea. His hyper-ancient Laputa people.
Right. His hypothesis, as the video explains it, is that these Laputa people were actually the ancestors of the Laputa. but living way, way earlier, like potentially over 10,000 years ago.
Wow, okay. That's a huge jump back in time.
It is. And again, this connects back to Fell's ancient one-world idea and the concept of seafaring spreading that megalithic big stone culture across the globe.
And Takeuchi used his petroglyph research to support this.
Apparently so. His studies of rock carvings, both worldwide and specifically in Japan, led him to conclude there was this incredibly ancient global maritime civilization, these Laputa people.
Sailing the globe over 10,000 years ago? It sounds almost impossible. What about actual evidence for boats that old? Does the video cover that?
It does touch on it. It mentions the famous Khufu ship from Egypt, which is impressive at 4,500 years old, a solar barge. But that's relatively recent in this context.
Right.
The video points to much older finds, dugout canoes, for example. There's evidence from Shimane University in Japan suggesting canoes around 7,000 years old, and even older ones, maybe 8,000 years old, found in China.
Okay, so simple boats existed, but crossing oceans, that feels different.
Well, this is where the obsidian trade evidence comes in, and it's pretty compelling. The video highlights findings in Japan.
Obsidian,
Yep.
like volcanic glass.
Exactly. Obsidian from specific islands like Kozushima and the Izu Peninsula has been found at a mainland site called Asahiyama in Shizuoka Prefecture. And the dating on this, some goes back as far as 38,000 years ago.
38,000, that's Paleolithic time.
Early Upper Paleolithic, yeah. It's kind of staggering because getting that obsidian from an island to the mainland requires boats and likely round trips.
Wow. Okay. That does suggest pretty sophisticated sea travel, much earlier than I would have thought.
It's considered internationally significant evidence for very early maritime capabilities. It definitely pushes the timeline back.
So if we entertain this idea of ancient seafaring, maybe even Takeuchi's Laputa people,
Yeah.
why would they be spreading this megalithic culture? What was the motivation? The video gets into Takeuchi's ideas on this, right?
Yes, it outlines two main drivers according to his theory. The first one is incredibly practical, securing fresh water.
Water on sea voyages. Makes sense.
Think about it. Long voyages, no modern filters. You absolutely need drinking water that won't spoil. Rainwater helps, but you need reliable storage.
Ah, okay. Back to the pottery. Like Laputa ware again. Essential for carrying water.
Exactly. Pottery is key for storage. But even stored water can go bad. So finding reliable sources of fresh water that doesn't easily putrefy, like spring water, would be absolutely critical for survival and long-distance travel.
Okay, so they needed springs. How do megaliths fit in?
Takeuchi's theory, as presented, is that these Laputa people identified and, crucially, marked these vital freshwater sources. The megaliths, these large stones or stone structures, could have served as markers, especially things called iwakura in Japan, sacred stones or rock formations.
So like signposts for water. In good locations like Japan, which the video notes has lots of spring water?
Potentially, marking reliable resources. And the age of some Japanese megalithic sites mentioned is, well, very old. A 6,000-year-old dolmen that's a type of single-chamber tomb in Amakusa. And Iwakura in Gifu, possibly dating back 10,000 to 7,000 years.
Whoa. If true, those could be among the oldest megalithic sites anywhere, marking water sources. That almost suggests a kind of map-making or territory marking.
It raises interesting possibilities. Now, Takeuchi's second proposed motivation, according to the video, involves sun worship and using megaliths as landmarks linked to the sky, specifically the summer solstice, gesh in Japanese.
Sun worship. Okay, how does that connect?
The video suggests a possible link to climate change back then. The end of the last ice age, maybe 11,000 or 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose dramatically.
Right, coastlines change everywhere.
And maybe, just maybe, the sun seemed more powerful, or its return each day more vital as the world became more habitable, warmer, wetter. Perhaps this led to a kind of sun-worship gratitude for life, for the conditions that allowed seafaring.
And the megaliths were part of this.
The idea is they served as astronomical markers or calendars. Many megalithic sites around the world are aligned with the sunrise on the summer-winter solstice. Or they lie on what some call solstice lines paths, connecting sites aligned with the sun's position on those key dates.
Like giant celestial clocks or compasses built from stone, water and sun worship, survival and reverence. Okay, so if these Laputa people existed so long ago, where might they have come from? What are the origin theories?
Well, the video touches on the current mainstream scientific view first, regarding the Pacific.
Which is?
that the Polynesians, who we know developed amazing sailing tech outrigger canoes, navigating by stars like the Pleiades, or Matariki as it's known in Maori.
Yeah, incredible navigators.
They're thought to have migrated out of Southeast Asia starting around 4,500 years ago. And these are likely the same people or closely related groups who made that Laputa pottery we talked about earlier.
So early Southeast Asians as the prime candidates for the first long-distance sailors. Makes sense.
But then the video brings in this other concept, Sundaland.
Sundaland, I've heard of that. It's like a lost landmass.
Yeah, sort of. It was a large area of land in Southeast Asia that was exposed during the last ice age when sea levels were much lower. It connected modern-day places like Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and the Malay Peninsula. But as the ice melted and seas rose, it got submerged, mostly gone by about 7,000 years ago.
Okay.
And the video mentions the Minatogawa man fossils, found near where Sundaland was in modern Indonesia, but their main habitat is suggested to have been Okinawa.
Okinawa. So they were traveling between these areas. How long ago?
The video suggests evidence for travel between these regions maybe as far back as 20,000 years ago, when Sundaland was still largely above water.
Wow. Okay, so people were moving around that region for a very long time. How does this connect to the Laputa people theory?
Well, the theory proposed is that the descendants of these ancient Sundaland inhabitants, people like Minatogawa man, were eventually displaced as the sea levels rose dramatically after the Ice Age.
Forced to move as their lands flooded.
Exactly. And perhaps some migrated south out into the islands, adapting their maritime skills. These could be the ancestors of the Polynesians. And maybe, just maybe, Takuchi's ancient seafaring Laputa people.
So Sundaland refugees becoming the world's first great ocean explorers.
That's the hypothesis presented. And the video does mention, almost as an aside, that some people even speculatively link Sundaland to the legend of the lost continent of Mu.
Ah, Mu. Right. Adds a bit of romanticism or mystery to it all.
Definitely adds a layer of intrigue, though that connection is highly speculative, of course.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've looked at the Laputa culture, definitely real. Pacific seafarers, 3,600 years ago, distinctive pottery, masters of island hopping.
Established history, though, with its own puzzles like the pottery stopping.
And then we dove into Kazutaka Takuchi's theory, based on Fell's ideas and petroglyphs about a much older, maybe 10,000 plus years ago, global seafaring culture he calls the Laputa people.
Yeah, a more speculative but quite compelling picture of ancient mariners spreading megalithic culture.
And the video suggested their motivations, according to Takuchi, were tied to, well, basics. Finding reliable freshwater sources marked by stones.
And possibly a reverence for the sun, using megaliths as astronomical markers, maybe linked to surviving the end of the Ice Age.
It really is kind of mind-blowing to think about global connections that far back. This deep dive, drawing on that Tullen vlog transcript, has definitely given me a lot to chew on.
It absolutely does. It throws up so many questions, doesn't it? Makes you want to look more into ancient boat technology, the dating of megaliths everywhere, the origins of those Pacific islanders.
And those old legends of lost lands, like Mu or Atlantis. Maybe they're not just legends.
Well, that's the big question these theories raise.
It leaves you wondering, could there be real echoes of an ancient, globally connected world, maybe something like these Laputa people, still present in our myths, our oldest stories, even hidden in plain sight in ancient stone structures around the world?
Perhaps the past was a lot more connected and a lot earlier than we usually imagine. Something to definitely keep thinking about.